plant project proposed to be put up in Kwasasi, Lamu County, is one that continues to generate debate largely on its impact on the environment and human health. Pollution experts warn the project could lead to premature deaths owing to increased air pollution that would be felt as far as Garissa and Voi. However, Amu Power, a consortium that runs the project and which includes Gulf Energy and Centum Investments, says the project has put up mechanisms to prevent any adverse effects on the people and the environment. So on Checkpoint this evening, our special features reporter Sharon Mamanyi investigates all these parameters in our special report, Cold Case. Up next.
Kama kuna mtu utamwendea ni Mungu muendee.
Sisi hapana wanyama, sisi ni binadamu bwana.
Magical is one of the words that have been used to describe Lamu. Aerial shots of the island attained exclusively by KTN News would make you think of one or two other magical words. Lamu is the oldest and best preserved Swahili settlement on the East African coast. For this, it is enlisted as a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
The livelihoods there, are also indeed so much linked to various things unique in this area.
But now, the world-famous archipelago is hitting global headlines for less magical reasons. The 1,050 coal power plant proposed to be put up in the area has got the residents, environmentalists, politicians and developers at loggerheads.
Coal mining is now in its last kicks, almost everywhere in the world.
Pollution now is turning out to be a major killer of human beings as the world goes on using coal and other fossil fuels.
Hakuna mtu utamwendea. Kama kuna mtu utamwendea ni Mungu muendee. Na wewe useme Mungu nilikosea jamii ya Lamu, kwa hivyo naomba unisamehe, naye aone kama atakusamehe.
Sisi hapana wanyama, sisi ni binadamu bwana. Hatuwezi kuleta kitu hapa ambaye itakuja kuumiza watoto wa hapa, kwa sababu watoto wa hapa ni watoto wa Kenya.
Do the benefits of this mega project outweigh its costs, or is Kenya about to make its gravest development mistake yet, the kind the whole world is running away from? An aerial view of the Lamu port at Manda Bay indicates that construction of the port is well underway. The port is a crucial part of the proposed power plant, as it is here that tons of coal imported from South Africa would dock and be transported to the power plant a short distance from the port. The coal-fired power plant is set to be put up in Kwasasi area of Lamu County, about 21 kilometers from Lamu town. And while there's no doubt that there's need for more generation of power in the country, this particular project has been met by a lot of resistance from some residents of Lamu County as well as environmental activists. The main bone of contention is the possible environmental impact of the project that activists say will be devastating. Coal power is regarded as dirty energy because it is the most carbon-intensive fossil fuel. Simply put, this is how coal-fired power plants produce electricity. Coal is burnt in a boiler to produce steam. The steam, which is produced under tremendous pressure, flows into a turbine.
The turbine then spins a generator to create electricity. According to the United Nations Environment Programme, coal emits around 1.7 times as much carbon per unit of energy when burned as does natural gas, and 1.25 times as much as oil. But why is this a concern?
A coal-fired power plant of this size would emit as much air pollutants as several million cars. And that has very significant impacts on public health over a very large area, including places like Garissa and Boy that are quite far away from the power plant. I estimate that the total health impacts over the lifetime of the project would be 1,600 premature deaths caused by exposure to air pollution.
A number of other gases and compounds are emitted when coal is burnt. It is some of these pollutants that can cause harm to human health, according to Dr. Jeremiah Chakaya, a respiratory physician in Nairobi.
I think we have not completely dissected out what the health effects of global warming, other than the fact that, of course, temperatures will rise, vulnerability to infection will increase, immunity will go down. There are many things that can happen as the world becomes warmer. In the lung, I think what people think is going to happen, which may already be happening, is that we will start getting an increase in certain diseases, especially asthma. Asthma, COPD. COPD is a condition in which the body's airway system doesn't function very well, tends to close when you breathe out and things like those. So those will become a lot more common, as it were. There's also an increased risk of lung cancer, so cancers of the lung will become a lot more common, and maybe an increase in infectious diseases, including an age-old disease that we've been fighting for many years called tuberculosis.
The plant is to be set up on an 865-acre land and would feature a 210-meter-tall smokestack, equivalent to a 70-story building. This chimney-like stack would become East Africa's tallest structure and is meant to deal with the toxic gases from the plant.
Now from there, anything that is built from this way, this way.
It is one of the mitigation measures that Amu Power has as its defense at the National Environmental Tribunal.
One of the things that are being built into this plant is a system called a flue gas sulfurization unit, which traps all the sulfur that is getting. So whatever you inject into the atmosphere is clean, 99% clean.
The whole theory is to take as much far the toxins to the air, isn't it? But that is really, to me, nonsense, because by the end of the day, they also descend down once they are released there. Those carbon dioxide and some of those gases are heavy gases.
Protests against the project have been many. On the 7th of September 2016, the National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, issued an environmental and social impact assessment license to Amu Power, giving it a nod to pursue the project. Soon after, in November, Save Lamu, a local community organization in Lamu, lodged an appeal at the National Environmental Tribunal, seeking a revocation of this license on grounds of gross environmental and health impacts. The appeal is yet to be concluded. "51-year-old Mohammed Athman cannot hold back his tears. He sits to give his statement before the tribunal at a hearing in Lamu, but he can only choke on his tears. He fears that his children and children's children may come to choke of something else should the coal project proceed."
Hisia zaidi zilinipanda kusikia uchungu kwamba nimezungukwa na wasomi na wanaoelewa sheria na wanaofahamu mazingira na wanajua zile athari ambazo zinatukumba saa hii. Matatizo ya hali ya hewa, global warming, climate change, excessive use of available resources ambazo tuko nazo. Hayo mambo yote yananiuma kwa sababu naona nimezungukwa na watu wasomi na nikana kwamba hawaelewi. Laiti hawangeelewa, hawengua saa hizi wametoa license kama shirika la NEMA kuwapatia go ahead hawa watu wafanye mradi kama huu.
There will be, for example, water, very high temperature water that will be released into the ocean. That, according to estimates, it will raise seawater temperature by 3 degrees Celsius. If that happens, then you have problems in mangroves, because mangroves are very, very sensitive to temperature changes. They are already being affected by climate change, but here you have induced, another thing.
Mtazamo wa wengi wanapinga mradi, lakini kuna wachache wenzetu ambao wana zile ardhi. Na ujue Lamu ni sehemu ya watu ambao ni maskini sana. Na kwa sababu ya mradi wa Lapset, eka ya ardhi ilikuwa inauzwa milioni 1.5. Wenzetu kadhaa walinufaika pale. So mradi huu ulipokuja, automatically kila mtu akawa na yeye anataka kulipwa. Kwa hivyo ukisikia sauti ya watu ambao wanaunga ni wale ambao wana ardhi.
Ocean water around Lamu Island is home to a myriad of species and a source of livelihood to most of the residents here. Saidi Mohammed Anis cleans his boat, ready to go fishing. Dirty or not, coal energy may just be a necessary move for Kenya, he says.
Zote ni maendeleo ya manufaa ya nchi, na ni maendeleo ambayo wananchi watapata manufaa, na ni maendeleo ambayo vizazi vijavyo vitapata manufaa. Sasa ukisema kwamba nitapinga, itakuwa ni vigumu kusema hivyo, kwa sababu hata kama kutakuwa na mazingira yatakuwa ya samaki yatakuwa yamekuwa na matatizo na nini, lakini kulingamana na mambo yalivyo sasa ya maendeleo yanavyokwenda, lazima tutakubali.
But there is a money dimension too. At the moment, Kenyans are paying relatively high bills for residential use of electricity, costing some 20 Kenya shillings and 46 cents per kilowatt hour. This compared to an equivalent of just about 10 shillings per kilowatt hour in South Africa. Proponents of the project argue that although it is a dirty, non-renewable energy, coal power is cheap and necessary to fuel a growing industrial sector and thus boost economic growth.
Tunaleta kitu ambayo lazima tumefanyia uchunguzi, lazima isimamiwe vizuri, kwa sababu tunataka ile energy ina generate to power the engines of the economy of this Lamu. Hiyo Lapset mnasikia tunaleta hapa. Hiyo mambo ya port 36 parts ambayo tunaleta hapa. You have to generate energy to run that economy. Hiyo pipeline ambayo itatoka hapa mpaka Turkana, you have to generate the energy to power that pipeline. Kama namna gani ndugu zangu?
Kenya has an installed electricity generating capacity of 2,325 megawatts against a peak demand of about 1,500 megawatts, which means that current generation capacity should meet demand. However, the government argues that energy-intensive activities such as mining, irrigation of large tracts of land for food security, operation of petroleum pipelines, and electrification of the SGR, the special economic zones, and a growing middle class with people having more equipment are bound to sharply raise the demand for energy. But this economic view is not unanimous, even within the government. Environment and Natural Resources Cabinet Secretary Professor Judy Wahungu, for instance, recently told a radio station that coal was a bad idea for Kenya.
We environment are quite clear that coal is dirty. There's no such thing as clean coal. But this is a decision that has been made for the energy requirements that were designed to best serve the Lapset project.
Mradi wa maka wala muhatutaki.
Around the globe, a seismic shift is underway. 7 of the world's most powerful states in June 2015 pledged to decarbonize the world by the end of the century during a G7 summit.
Viongozi mbalimbali wa serikali ya Kenya, tunawaomba tafadhali mradi uondoke.
Kenya is party to the Paris Climate Accord of 2015, which tasks each member country to limit greenhouse gas emissions. The UN says there can be no new coal mines if the world is to keep global temperature rises below 2 degrees. But some critics, mainly in developing countries such as Kenya, have argued that Western countries fueled their development largely by coal energy, adding that it is hypocritical for them to champion the anti-coal movement in poorer countries.
Mashairi yetu ya kuhusu mradi wa makaa hapa Lamu ni ujumbe huyu, bila shaka mwananchi yote wa hapa Kenya na ulimwengu mzima watajua kwamba shairi hili limekataa mradi wa makaa hapa Lamu, kwa sababu tunajua kwamba utaleta hatari katika jamii yetu na vizazi vingine vitakapokuja.
Kenya is not looking back. In April 2017, the country entered into a 206 billion shilling deal with China to finance the proposed Lamu coal plant. This is despite the fact that the Chinese government has itself suspended issuance of permits for coal power plants in its own territory.
Let's take time. Tujiulize maswali, tutafute ukweli, tukubaliane, alafu tuendelee na kujenga Kenya hii.
Though they are there, they still impact at that level.
Yes.
Is that correct?
In one of the hearings at the National Environmental Tribunal, air pollution expert Lori Milivirta stated that NEMA in its ESIA study did not reveal the health impacts that the project would have.
The environmental impact study of the plant has completely failed to quantify the public health impacts. And not only that, the project proponent has gone to local communities and told them categorically that there will be no public health impacts, which is absolutely unscientific and untruthful.
Experts say Kenya has boundless quantities of what is usually called renewable energy, that is, energy drawn from sources which are naturally replenished, such as sunlight, wind, and geothermal heat. This form of energy, also known as clean energy, causes little or no pollution. It also has negligible, if any, emissions that cause global warming. Kenya is argued to have enough geothermal, solar, hydro, and wind potential to not only be self-sufficient, but to become an energy exporter. In 2016, geothermal energy accounted for 45% of the electricity generated in the country, followed by hydropower at 40% for a combined share of 85%. Diesel plants did 15% and wind less than 1%. Kenya's environment watchdog NEMA says the Lamu coal plant meets standards set by the Air Quality Standards Regulations in Kenya, questioning the supremacy of international standards over Kenyan ones.
The main two issues that are coming out from the case is whether the procedure provided for by the Act for approving an environmental impact assessment study was followed, and whether the comments that were given by the members of the public in regard to the project were incorporated as sufficient mitigation measures.
But what many Kenyans here in Lamu really care about is, will the project harm their health, the environment? And if there is reasonable doubt, can the project's energy generation goals be met by other safer means?
In our view, there was full compliance and sufficient mitigation measures have been put in place to ensure that there is no harm that will befall any member of the community, and also that the marine life will be protected.
I've assessed the health impacts of this plant, taking into account all the pollution control measures that the project developer is saying they will use. And even after that, taking into account those measures, a very significant public health impact remains. Even taking into account those measures, the power plant would cause, by my estimation, 1,600 premature deaths over its operating life.
Kwa nini serikali isisimame kidete na wananchi wa Lamu wakati sisi tunasema kwamba huu mradi ni mbaya, huu mradi una maafa, huu mradi utakuja kuua jamii, huu mradi utakuja kuua kizazi cha baadaye, wakati katiba article 42 imesema kwamba kila mtu ana haki ya kuishi katika mazingira safi katika hali ya sasa ya present and for the future generation. That means for the future generation, hata kama madhara ya mradi wa coal yatakuja baada ya miaka 100, hapo future generation ndio mahali inaingilia.
In May 2017, KTN News wrote to Amu Power seeking a response to the complaints from the community and local leaders. But the company declined a television interview, saying the disputes about the project were already being resolved through the legal channels. On its website, Amu Power insists that it has developed what it calls a grievance mechanism to allow the community to raise important issues on the project. The company says it operates in a transparent manner and is guided by the core values of community partnership, respect for the environment, and transforming lives. It says it has so far taken several activities in Lamu, including water delivery, food donations, street lighting, and afforestation to improve the lives of residents.
And yet, even after acknowledging contributions of climate change to food security.
So heated is the coal contention that it found its way in the recent presidential debate held in Nairobi.
Now, even though your manifesto gave a leeway in terms of environmental social impact assessment before projects, I would like to know that for cases like the Lamu coal plant, where it's clear that the social environmental impacts will be irreversibly terrible for the communities, what would you do as an executive to protect communities from such impacts?
Coal plants still exist all over the world. You go to China, they're there. You go to Europe, they're there. In the United States, they're there. There's what is called clean coal. Clean coal as opposed to just ordinary coal plants. So that is an issue that needs to be looked at more comprehensively rather than just emotionally.
It is not clear whether the coal plant will be an election issue on August 8th, but whichever way the election goes, it will be a while before Kenya's old town with narrow streets can get back its quiet reputation. Sharon Momanyi, KTN News, Lamu County.